It's almost hard to keep track of all the headlines coming out of Washington these days, from harassment-related resignations to the tax bill that just passed the Senate to a guilty plea from the president's former national security advisor. So let's just jump right into these topics with none other than Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Thank you for being here, Senator.
Nice to be here. Always nice to be in New Hampshire.
Thank you very much. First off, your colleague, Senator Al Franken, announced last week his intention to resign from the Senate amid a growing list of allegations from women alleging sexual misconduct against him. But because he has not resigned yet, there is still his case pending with the Ethics Committee. So you're in a bind in terms of commenting on this. Explain what you can say.
Well, I'm on the Ethics Committee. The Ethics Committee is the only committee within the Senate that's equally divided between Democrats and Republicans. There are 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, and we act on any ethics complaints that are brought before the Senate. And the matter of Senator Franken is still pending before the Ethics Committee. He is still a sitting senator. He's indicated his intent to resign, but he has not done that yet. So I can't comment because we're prohibited from commenting on any matter that is before the committee or may come before the committee.
So let's look at this more broadly then. Representative Trent Franks of Arizona just resigned over on the House side. Are we going to see more men being held accountable for their behavior on Capitol Hill resigning because of these kind of accusations?
I think, fortunately, we're having a national conversation about this issue of sexual harassment, and I applaud all of the women who have come forward, and some men who have come forward too, to say that they have been harassed. So I do think we're going to see more people in the private sector and in the public sector, and Congress needs to police itself. There is legislation that's being worked on that I'm hoping to co-sponsor, that I think will be introduced sometime next week, that will help with holding people in Congress accountable and making the process easier for those people who are victims.
Why is this so difficult with politics? You see, in the corporate world, it's fairly easy. They're employees. They can be forced out. Here, you're an elected official, and politics, unfortunately, is rife with this kind of behavior.
Well, too much of life in America has been rife with this kind of behavior, and certainly politics is not exempt. So, but the challenge is when people are elected officials, they're elected by voters, and it's not like you have a CEO who can fire somebody. You have voters who have to decide, or you have to have an ethics process or some way to address concerns that are brought forward.
And speaking of elections, down in Alabama, there is a U.S. Senate election where the Republican candidate, Roy Moore, is facing some very serious accusations. Your Republican colleague, Cory Gardner, has already said the Senate should vote to expel Roy Moore if he wins. Would you be on that side? Would you say, let's vote to expel a Senator Roy Moore if he's elected?
Well, again, because this matter is likely to be pending before the Ethics Committee, I'm not able to comment on this one either. But I do think it's important that people have spoken out, and I applaud Senator Gardner and others who have raised their concerns.
Would you be willing to sit on a committee with a Senator Roy Moore?
Well, again, the Ethics Committee, I think, is going to take this up if he's elected, and so we will we'll make a determination.
Fair enough. Over to the White House then. There's a lot of grumbling right now, particularly among progressives. On social media, it's almost surprising to see the amount of anger there is that Senator Franken is being held accountable and being forced to resign. Representative Conyers being forced to resign, and yet the president, who has also faced similar accusations of sexual misconduct, persists in the White House. Is this a frustration for you?
I think it's very upsetting that the president has not, although on the Access Hollywood tape, he said that he had he had engaged in sexual misconduct against women. Now he's saying, oh, that wasn't my voice, that wasn't me, I didn't do it. I think he needs to take responsibility and apologize for what he's done.
Resign?
Well, I think the American people have a say in that, so I think we'll see what happens in future elections.
Let's move to the tax reform bill that recently passed the Senate. There's been a lot of criticism of the process or lack thereof. Republicans respond to that criticism by saying, yeah, we'll look at Obamacare just a few years back.
Oh, yeah, but wait, there's a big difference, Adam. There was not one public hearing on the tax bill. There were dozens and dozens of hearings on the health care legislation. There were over 100 Republican amendments that were accepted. There was a process on the floor. None of this happened with the tax bill. Now, I think we need tax reform in this country, but we need it in a way that reduces corporate taxes but gives breaks to middle-income families, who so many of whom are really struggling, and this bill does not do that.
And the trend line, though, is not great for process, though, from Obamacare to the tax bill. Have we seen the end of regular order? Is this the new normal now?
Boy, I hope not, because, you know, the important thing about having hearings and getting input is that it gives you a chance to see where you're making mistakes and where you can improve things. And working together is really important to producing a good piece of legislation. One of the things I learned way back when I was in the state Senate is that one party doesn't have all the good ideas. And if you work together, you're more likely to get a product that people can support and that can get implemented. And what we saw with this legislation isn't just that the substance is terrible. It's bad for property owners, particularly in New Hampshire, where we're going to see property values, according to the realtors, drop almost as much as they did after the financial crisis. It's not good for students, who are going to have a problem with increased costs of student loans, with graduate students who are going to get taxed on their stipends. But the process really was lousy. You know, passing this bill in the middle of the night, giving it to us so we didn't have a chance to read it, over 500 pages that we received, you know, 2 hours before we were expected to vote on it, having provisions put into the legislation that nobody knew about, having handwritten notes in the margin to change language. That is not the kind of process that the American people expect from their Congress.
At the beginning of the month, the president's former national security advisor, General Flynn, entered a guilty plea to essentially lying to the FBI. He's now cooperating with the special counsel in the investigation there into the Russian matter. You pretty much called this one a year ago when you pointed out General Flynn's foreign entanglements during that January process there. With this plea, some legal analysts say there's really only one direction this is headed, and that's up the chain of command. That's a sobering thought.
Well, that's certainly the indication that I've heard from all of the analysis that I've seen. Now, I'm not on the Intelligence Committee in the Senate or the Judiciary Committee, so I haven't been privy to some of those closed-door sessions. But certainly what we know about former National Security Advisor Flynn raises very troubling questions about who else in the Trump campaign knew what was going on, about what the president knew, about what his sons and son-in-law Jared Kushner knew, and I think that's what we're going to learn from the investigation.
Do you have any sense of what your Republican colleagues might do if the president chooses to fire the special counsel?
I don't. I certainly hope it's not going to come to that. And most of my colleagues on the Republican side were very supportive when Mueller was appointed, former FBI Director Mueller. They have been very much engaged. The chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr, has been very much engaged. It's a bipartisan effort. The House effort is bipartisan. So I would hope that everybody would understand that we need to get to the bottom of this investigation, that it's not about partisan politics. You know, I hear from some folks who say, oh, well, you're just upset because Donald Trump won the election. That's not what this is about. This is about making sure that people comply with the law. It's about making sure that we don't allow Russia, who is an adversary, to intervene in our democracy. And because we know that if they get away with it once, they're going to continue to do it. And we're seeing it all across Europe.
And again, a sobering topic to consider, but will the impeachment of the President of the United States become a real consideration in 2018?
Well, I don't think we're there yet. I think we need to see what the outcome of that investigation is and let it run its course and get all the information that we need to find out what really happened here.
You mentioned Vladimir Putin, and that's the other part of this too. He probably holds a lot of other cards right now. We know that he was involved in hacking the Democrats. There's some evidence that he did the same on the other side, so it's potentially a big bag of dirty tricks that he could play on the United States and the American people. With a country so divided already, do you worry about what he could do to further divide us through this process?
Well, and that's their intent. You know, one of the things that we've heard from the experts who have been looking at this is that just as the Putin regime in Russia is increasing their military support in all kinds of ways, building more ships, increasing their nuclear potential for missiles, they're also looking at ways that they can undermine Western democracies, and that's the issue. They didn't come in and change votes. What they did was sow concern among the electorate, among voters in America about the process, and they're raising concerns so that people don't know if they can believe in our democratic process, and that's their goal. It's to undermine Western democracies so that they can increase their leverage.
And, I'm sorry, but there certainly is.
We've seen it, you know, as I said, we saw it in England with Brexit. We've seen it in Spain recently with their separatist movement in Catalonia. We've seen it in the Netherlands. It's all across Europe, in France before their election. So it's not just aimed at the United States, it's aimed at the West.
Should we be trying to do the same thing to them?
I think we need to look at ways to counter these kinds of efforts, particularly their disinformation campaigns, the whole thing around fake news. Well, they're sowing fake news. It's really true. They're trying to get people to send stories that are not true. And we need to figure out how to counter that, because that's my biggest concern about what they've been doing, is that people no longer know what to believe and they don't know where to get their information.
All right. Certainly a non-fake news location here on Close Up.
Right.
We'll be back in just a little bit.